Billy, you seem to have completely mastered the fingerboard. What can you tell us about the shapes and the patterns you use to connect the neck up?
Well, I doubt if mastered is the word, but
oh, looks like it.
Stumbled upon some form of understanding of it. When I play a particular scale, like we touched on in the last video, I have certain patterns that I use, like for a G major scale. For me, when I play, again, to reiterate, when I play a pattern in one position, like for the G major scale, like I did right there, I do all the notes that you can do in a G major scale in that position, which would also include this low F sharp, even though it isn't really part of that scale, just because it's contained in there, and it's a note that your finger can go to in that scale, so I do it. So actually a G major scale for me then would be...
Right.
So I get them all in there. So now, another type of scale, the only other type of scale that I know of actually is a pentatonic scale.
Well, wait a minute, though. You could get minor off the major. So.
Yeah, because it's major and minor I consider pretty much.
And you're pretty fluid with both sounds, major and minor, and you're playing.
Well, that's pretty much because they're both really the same thing.
Right, so you can parlay that.
Yeah, just as a G major scale.
Right.
In G is a minor.
Exactly.
Is an E minor, a form of the E minor modes or scale.
Right.
You help me out with this.
So you have both facets of it contained in that scale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now the pentatonic is kind of major and minor free. It's kind of an Oriental.
Right.
So what it is, actually, when I do it, I also try to do it all the way across the neck. So we're doing 2 notes per string.
Let me ask you, because it's a 5-note scale, that's why we're limited to basically 2 notes in the positions as opposed to 3.
Good point. Actually, I forgot all about that, but you're totally right. So now if you take part of that pattern, put it together, that's your G major chord. So if you're playing guitar and you had 2 extra strings there, it would be a for real G major chord. So now you know that is a pattern of a chord, and it's made up of those component notes. Now if you take the pattern that that chord makes, in this case we'll move this finger up to there.
Right.
Even that sounds rather dissonant. It is. It's a non-resolved something or other.
Well, it's a G with A in the bass.
Yeah, it's a G with A in the bass.
Needs resolution, though, you're right.
Yeah, right. New Year's resolution. Anyway, so there's a G major scale. Now if I take the top notes of that pattern, comes the bottom notes of the next position. Now here, there's so we're back up to the octave. So what I'm doing there is I'm trying to show the top note of each position of a pentatonic scale makes a pattern, which in itself is a chord, basically.
Right, of some type.
Yeah, I see that I don't know the names of.
It could change depending on what's behind you, harmonically.
Yeah, so okay, that's your department, I guess.
Okay.
I'll just play it, you explain it. But the song that I did with Mr. Big called Had Enough.
Right.
When I was learning the modes on guitar, the E minor mode, it actually formed a chord by the lower parts of it. And when I strummed that chord, and I actually did all of the chords made up of that mode, it actually seemed to make a reasonable facsimile of kind of a song-y type of thing.
Okay, well, let's see what that's like on the guitar, if you wouldn't mind demonstrating that.
Yeah, hand me that little boy over there, and I'll see what we can do with it here. Anyway, the idea, when I was practicing guitar, learning a couple things to write some songs, and I write a lot on guitar, but which sounds like an Allman Brothers song, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It has that country flavor to it.
Anyway, so I noticed that that chord that made was part of all those notes there. So it actually became...
Yeah.
It became part of the...
So you derive those chords from the mode.
Right, so it's an E minor kind of mode. So that fits. All any pattern. I always wonder how these jazz guys got these amazing chords all over the place, because they understand scales so well.
Exactly.
That they can put any configuration of notes together and come up with an amazo chord thing. So you see these jazz guys doing all these comping chord stuff, and I always wonder, how in the world do they ever learn all those chords? Well, they just basically know their stuff, and they know their scales, and they know their modes, and they know how to put them all together in lightning fast, and
that relates exactly to what you're talking about, connecting all the shapes.
Right. So what I'm doing basically is just like, so now if I take like a G major, the pentatonic version. So I know if I'm in G. All those. It's all in G. So if I'm playing in the key of G, it's easy to find a spot to go to, because you know that's your spot. Then you just do variations, part of one, part of another. So.
Now, do you visualize the note G somewhere in those shapes?
Sometimes I do. Like, for example, G major. If I got that note in the middle, this is kind of the simple way I did it when I first started, but it actually still holds true to this day, for me anyway. 2 whole steps here, 2 whole steps here, and 2 whole steps on the string underneath. If that's your root, you know that if you got a string above it and below it, and it's ridiculously simple, but it helps you to get a start on the idea of having a pattern and having some place to go. So now, similarly, any of those notes, of those 9 notes, work with that.
Various combinations can be created. Yeah.
All basically in the key. You can, of course, I'm stretching a point, and I don't understand it musically enough to really explain it in those terms, but I'm explaining it in pattern terms.
Exactly.
So now, once you know that there's your, so that pattern works up here, or if you have enough fret.
But what note is your reference note to? The G there.
The G. In the middle. So now you know, anytime you have a key anywhere, again, ridiculously simplistic, if your key is like, you know, that, you know that if you're in a major, you know that your pattern around that is such. Of course, there's a million other patterns around it within the context of a major scale. But
so all these things are movable, and they remain symmetrical.
They remain relatively the same. So if you have a particular note, and it's a major scale, and it starts and has that note there in it, you know that you've got all those notes around it that you can go to play if you so desire.
So it's really a matter of being selective then with the notes. Once you've accumulated a lot of them, you become selective with what you play out of those patterns.
Exactly. So now, instead of just doing it rote pattern thinking, once you're used to moving in those patterns, and you can kind of just step back and let that little machine you created with your hands kind of direct it from like a remote control thing.
Like directing the machine, the analogy you made speaking earlier about how you use scales.
Yeah, basically you just create a hand that does all the moves, and then you sit back and kind of with your little remote control, like you would a little race car or something, and make it work around. That's pretty much how I play, because I don't really think about the scales I'm doing. I don't think about what's going on. I'm just kind of reaching into the cosmos or the ozone or whatever zone that it happens to be, and trying to find some areas there that kind of relay what I'm feeling and thinking at the time, or you know, on stage or in the studio, whatever. But to give you an idea, all those notes that I played are those 9 notes that work around this G, G included. If you're just...
Are there some specific areas of movement that are better than others in connecting these shapes?
Well, you get used to certain moves with your hands. Like for a long time, for many years, that was my move. So whenever I was solo, if it was an E minor, which is the relative minor to G major,